We won an award. Woo, woo, woo. And what I mean by that is this podcast, Thriving After Trauma, recently won an award for Podcast of the Year. So, in case you don't know, I studied through the Beautiful You Coaching Academy and am certified through them. Every year they have annual awards where they have six or seven different categories. So this year I was a finalist for International Coach of the Year and also Podcast of the Year. And this year, Thriving After Trauma won Podcast of the Year. And it blows me away. It blows me away to think that, you know, this little podcast, this little space of mine where I just get to speak and say what's on my mind is recognized in such a way. And the Beautiful You Coaching Academy has global reach. You know, they have coaches all over the world. They are aligned with the International Coaching Federation, and it's just the best community in the world. So it's really amazing. It's really amazing. And I, I feel like I wanted to do an episode that was, you know, just fun today because I know over the last few weeks, obviously, I have been talking a lot about Visionaries, my 6 month group coaching program, as I was launching and inviting people into the next round of that. And now that we have officially wrapped that up, it's kind of perfect timing. It's kind of perfect timing. So I thought I would take you on a trip down memory lane, which feels really fun. When I started this podcast, my whole life had kind of changed, been turned upside down and flipped a few times in, a period beforehand. So, for reference, over a 6 month period at the end of 2020, start of 2021, I had a big 6 months. I broke up with my ex boyfriend. So I broke up with my partner at the time, which meant moving out of our place and he kind of took off. So it left me packing up everything of mine, but really I left everything to him and moving into an apartment that I already owned or moving back into an apartment that I owned, buying new furniture, making that apartment feel like a home. We were still working from home because of COVID. So I broke up with my partner, moved out, moved back into my apartment, started dating my now fiance, soon to be husband, who I'd been friends with for a very long time. Quit my job, went full time in my business, and then got pregnant. It was a very full 6 months. Not something that I would ever plan. In my mind, I was going to be single for a year or two and really focus on my business and finding myself again. And of course, that didn't happen. And in amongst all of that, my coach had a podcast, I had a few friends that were starting podcasts. And I kind of thought, I just really want a space where I can talk and share and be in people's ears and make it accessible. I had was then and still do run free masterclasses and workshops and that kind of thing, but podcasts are different, right? You can access it anywhere, anytime. You don't have to be available at a certain time. And also, I feel like there's this little I feel like it's different. If someone's coming to a masterclass or a workshop, they're doing it because they want to get something out of it, or they're doing it like they're signing up for it for a specific reason. Whereas podcasting to me was about, I was a really big listener to podcasts back then. And, it was just so inspiring to hear different people's views and opinions and guest speakers and that kind of thing. And while I still love podcasts, the reality is I used to listen to them when I was driving to and from work in two different places, whereas now I don't really drive anywhere other than to drop the kids off. And I can tell you right now that listening to a podcast while having kids in the car is not going to be like, I'm not going to absorb any of it. And so I started this podcast. I started it as a passion project, as something I just wanted to offer in addition to my coaching I wanted to speak to incredible humans because that is one of my most favorite things to do is to have really deep, honest conversations and, you know, to see how it goes. And the podcast since then has had three evolutions. So it started as Your True Self, and my, I guess, signature 6 month group coaching program back then was True Self Experience. And then I kind of grew and changed and evolved, and it became the Warrior Within podcast. Then I had my second son, and I took some time off. So I didn't take any time off when I had my first son. But with my second son, I really wanted to take some time off. And it was a lot more time than I thought it was going to be. I did two short seasons. So I did two extra seasons in a space of 2 years where I released, I think, 10 to 15 episodes at once. And then at the end of last year, I just really, really wanted to come back. But I also knew that the name of the podcast, once again, I had outgrown. And when I was getting really honest with what it is that I do, thriving after trauma came through. And I think if I'm honest, I probably already always knew that trauma should have been in the title of my podcast, but I think when I started my business, I was scared to use the word trauma. You know, I was scared to promote myself as a trauma coach. I was scared to, yeah, really speak to the nitty gritty of what I do, partly because I'm so mindful that there are so many different types of trauma, and I'm not a psychologist. And I think I wanted to avoid hate, if I'm honest. The reality is, I don't act as a psychologist. I know where the work, where the scope of my role is and where it isn't. And so I'm claiming it. You know, this is the year where I fully step up and claim who I am, the work that I do, and how I support people. And I support people to thrive after trauma. So that is the natural evolution over the 5 years. It launched in 2021, over the 5 years that we've been here, that I've been in your ears. This is the 190th episode, which is wild, wild. And that's with, the best part of a year or 2 years off. And there's so many things that I've learned along the way. One of them is that everyone has a story. I don't know why I'm getting emotional about that, but I am. We know that everybody has a story, but I think we're so quick to judge other people based on, who they are, or like who they appear to be in person, or who they are online, or what we know about them. And so often, more often than not, we actually have no idea about what they've been through, what they've experienced. It's wild. And we don't take time to stop and talk to people. The other week I did a presentation at Monash Uni where, for the first time ever, I shared my story in a room full of people, like 300 people, I think it was. And yes, I have shared my story before. I've shared it on this podcast. If you haven't heard it, listen to episode 1. Go back, scroll, scroll, scroll. And it just reminded me of like how much I've lived through, and my own story, and both the good and the bad. And being able to interview people on this podcast feels like a real privilege, because every episode where I've interviewed someone else, there has been this invitation into somebody's world. And it's really, really special. I also I don't think we have enough space. We don't create enough space in the world to hear the real story behind people. I've heard people speak recently, and, they've told a version of their story or part of, their reality now. And I'm like, yeah, but I want to know what happened before that. I want to know what happened, at the start. And this podcast lets me do that. It's my podcast, so I get to ask whatever I want. And also, people don't come on this podcast unless they're prepared to talk. Sometimes people share more than they expect. And that's so great to me. I am all for real, honest conversations that aren't scripted and, awkward and question answer, which I'm really proud of that this is what that is what this podcast does. I've also become less of a perfectionist since doing this podcast. I remember when I first started it, if I made a mistake like I did just then, I would, stop, rewind, start again so everything was really proper and correct. And now you just get me. And I love that. I love being the most unapologetic version of myself. I also used to script every episode. I would write every episode, and well, I don't believe that you could tell pretty much read word for word every episode. Whereas now some I do script and others I'm just winging it. Today I've got a couple of points that I'm chatting to you about that I really wanted to talk about, but really this is just a celebration. A celebration of myself and the work that has gone into this podcast because I'm really, really proud of that. And also to you for listening, for you to tuning in, whether you have been here right from the start, which I know so many of you have, or whether you've just joined along the way. I don't even care. Like, I'm just so grateful that you're here. I'm so grateful that this is a podcast that you choose to listen to. And that feels so special. Something else that I've realized is that I have much greater impact on people than I believe or that I tell myself. I probably still downplay my strengths and the power of my story and the inspiration of my story a little bit. I know that I'm a brilliant coach, but I can't, I'm just a coach. I just ask questions, and you do the work. But I also realize that my story and the way that I support people impacts people so much deeper than I ever thought it would. And I also realize that I have impact on people's lives and I have absolutely no idea who they are. And you might be one of those. If you're one of someone that listens to this, but you've never reached out or we've never had a conversation, obviously you're listening because this podcast has impact. And I would really love for you to reach out and say hi and share that with me. But after I did my talk the other week, I had so many people come up to me and tell me how inspiring my story was and thanking me for sharing it, which kind of blows my mind. And then a couple of them asked me to write a book. Like, can you please write a book? Because I want to know all of it. Like, I want to know everything. And again, I'm certainly, you can look at my Instagram follower. I'm definitely not an influencer and I'm not famous. But the fact that I can speak in a room where people then come up to me and ask me to write a book shows me that my story has power, and it also tells me that I need to keep on talking. I need to keep on sharing. So that's what I'm going to do. This podcast really is, it started as a passion project, as something of love, of just, I get to do it because it's just fun. And me and a few friends, we launched our podcasts at a really similar time, and all of us were like, it's just really fun. Like, you just get to talk, and there's no pressure and there's no expectation. And it's just a really beautiful way of connecting with people without having to, be somewhere at a certain time, as I said. But it has evolved into a really healing place for me. Whew, wow, didn't think that I would be getting emotional, but I've shared some big challenges that I've had on this podcast. When we had our miscarriage, I did an episode on that and had such incredible feedback. There have been moments that I've, you know, recorded a podcast and been navigating so much, and so often, more often than you know, the podcast that I'm creating for you is actually for me. Or what I talk about is something that I've just been through and experienced. And it has been one of the most therapeutic things for me, whether it's writing out what I'm going to talk about or sitting down and just riffing on something or being blown away by the stories of my guests and my clients. But it's become a real home for me. And until I started it again this year, I didn't realize just how important it was to me, how much I needed that space. And while I do believe that I needed the break because I'm not sure how good the episodes would have been if I was trying to force them out, that break has really shown me what this podcast means to me and why I do it. And ultimately, none of it would be possible without you. None of it would be possible without you subscribing, you listening, you sharing on Instagram and social media, you telling your friends about it or recommending episodes to people. And, if there's one thing that I can ask, if I may, please keep doing that. Like, subscribe to my podcast, download the episodes, share it with your friends, share it on social media, tag me, please. You know, we talk about celebrating people and working in collaboration. And I've seen a lot recently, which feels like it's something that I need to talk about at some stage, where we quickly celebrate and comment on and share, famous people's quotes and stuff. And then we see the people that we love and we don't take half a second to like or share or post something that we love and something that we appreciate. And as a small business owner, people find me through those shares, through those referrals, through those posts. And, you know, again, as a small business owner and a mum of two, my business relies on you. And when I say you, I don't mean like you paying or buying or working with me, because I know that not everybody that listens to this will work with me. But through those shares and through those comments and through that word of mouth, it's really, really important. So please share away anything that I post, any episode that I do, share with those people that you think need it, because that is ultimately how, one, I connect with people, but two, how people find their community. And that's what my work is. It is a community. Yeah, I get that it's my business, but it's not really about me. I wouldn't create a podcast. I wouldn't take the time and effort to sit down and record episodes and edit episodes and do all of that if it was just for me. Man, I've got a journal. I've got voice notes on my phone. Um, yeah. And I think I look back at how far I've come since, I want to say since studying to be a coach in 2018, but really it was before then. I started or committed, decided that I was going to heal and work on myself in 2016. And the 15 years prior to that were, you know, there was a lot going on. And I just look back at all of the different versions of me and I'm really proud. I'm proud of us. I'm proud of me. I'm proud of how far I've come. And sure, I might talk myself down and I still get imposter syndrome. Absolutely, I still get imposter syndrome sometimes. But I know that my work matters. And I know that this podcast matters. And while I don't need an award to tell me that, it's so nice. It's so nice for this podcast to be recognized in that way. And that is all I have to say today. I just wanted to share with the world that we won a podcast, that we are podcast of the year for 2025, 2026. That I am so grateful to everyone that has ever listened to this podcast, to anyone who has ever shared, to anyone who has ever liked one of my posts, to anyone who has believed in me or followed me. And I think, I turned 40 this year. Wow. Not sure how that happened, But I'm finally starting to see just how important my work is, but also how important it is for me to claim every part of me, the good, the bad, the messy, the bits that I fuck up, and everything in between. So thank you so much for being here. We'll be back next week with an incredible guest and a lot more topics and things to share. But for now, let's just celebrate. Celebrate. Celebrate me. Celebrate you. Just celebrate everybody. Thank you.